Hello, 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 everyone. My name is Matthew Terry, founder and CEO of Suade, and welcome to People in Sales, Not Salespeople, where we analyze the person behind the salesperson. I'd like to introduce Sam to you. Sam and I have been good friends. We met at Cohatch, and Sam has been a sales consultant, business advisor, business development manager, commercial developer for four prestigious businesses in the industry sector. So I'm super excited to dive into your background and your experience in sales. And I'd like to start all the way back at the beginning. Let's go all the way back and tell us about your first job in sales. What was that like?
Oof. Man, well, thanks so much for having me on. Technically, my first job in sales, I was in like eighth grade. I sold hot dogs at the state fair. But for the purposes of a more productive conversation, I would say my first job out of college
Okay.
was for a residential solar
Okay.
installer.
Mm-hmm.
So I was sitting at the kitchen table trying to get panels on the roof.
Yeah.
That was actually a full commission, eat what you kill role. So it was a little bit of like a sink or swim
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. How'd
Um,
you get into it though? Like, was it, something at a job fair or like, how'd you first hear about the job? And
yeah, it was actually one of my college professors knew that I was really interested in like the energy sector. I'll
okay.
say broadly.
Yeah.
He was like, I had an old student that like now runs a sales team. Seems like it might be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And he gave him a call. He said, "Can you come in for an interview today?" And I was like, "Well, I've got your class today." And
Let's
he was
go.
like, "Skip it, go." And here we
Yeah.
are, like a
Yeah.
decade later.
Hey, that's super awesome.
Yeah,
Okay. And you said a commission only.
yeah,
Right out of college. So
full
you were like,
commission.
hey,
Yeah.
I'm not getting salary. I'm really just gonna go out here and try and sell this thing and see what can happen.
Yeah, I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'll kill it right off the bat,"
Yeah.
which was not the case.
Okay.
So I was living in Boston at the time, and the first year I was not hitting the marks.
No.
I was not hitting my KPIs or my sales goals. Eating mashed potato sandwiches, just getting by, watching the
Hmm.
comma in my bank account disappear every time I paid rent.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel that.
but eventually, I glued myself to, some of the top performers on the
Okay.
team, and they were super awesome about just like, allowing me shadow them and pick their brain, and kind of, took their best practices, formed into something that worked well for me.
Hmm.
And over the course of a few months, into my second and third year, I was able to, eventually like triple my close rate.
Nice.
So I was, making for like a 23, 24-year-old, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. I'm working 25 hours a week, like,
Uh-huh.
closing every other sale that I go to, and just
Right.
life was great for
I'm sure,
that
man.
was
I'm
that was the peak of
sure.
the roller coaster.
Right.
Um,
You're getting all this
but
commission and like really, really good at what you do. And that directly equates to, the money in your bank account.
exactly,
So
exactly.
you were chilling. Okay. Okay. So tell us the secrets then. Like what you started at certain
Yeah,
mindset, certain skill set, then you shadowed or kind of copycat the top, and then you excelled. So what was kind of the secret of the success there?
yeah. I don't know if there's like one silver bullet
Okay.
that just enabled me to like, really build confidence and increase my close rate. I would say if there was one thing that stands out, it's just really having like genuine empathy for the
Mm,
person that's sitting across from you and
mm,
understanding like what are their concerns, right? Because you might think you have a fantastic product for X, Y, and Z reasons, and they
mm-hmm,
might not even care about that.
mm-hmm.
So trying to get objections out on the table early and understanding where they're coming from, I think was pretty critical for me to excel
Yeah.
on kind of that next level.
Yeah, that's huge. A lot of sales professionals talk about that, empathy in sales, and making sure you don't go into conversations with a lot of assumptions,
Yeah,
or just pitch, right off the bat,
yeah,
right? And that's
exactly,
how I feel like a lot of like the sales stigma, the bad sales stigma comes from.
definitely.
There's bad salespeople who don't know what they're doing. They're just super pushy and all
Yeah,
that stuff. And that kind of brings me to a lot of my next question. A lot of people think sales is a scary, manipulative practice.
yeah.
Right. What would you tell those people?
I understand why there's a stigma
Okay.
around sales. I think we've all dealt with bad actors. We have them in every industry, and sales is no different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think that the narrative is changing a little bit from a buyer beware to a seller beware.
Mm.
With the advent of just, the internet and ubiquitous information about any product or service you're shopping for,
Hmm.
you know, consumer shopping platforms, et cetera, et cetera. You know, if you put in the time and do your homework, you can be pretty savvy going into that conversation
Yeah,
and, better protect yourself from those bad actors.
gotcha. Yeah. So really it's just around the salesperson not being truthful in the conversation that you feel
Yeah,
like most people
I think there
are afraid
are,
of.
yeah, we've all dealt with, salespeople that either, they bend the truth,
Hmm.
they kind of fabricate it to their favor. So yeah, just, coming in with a little bit more knowledge, not coming in cold,
Right,
doing your due diligence, shopping around.
right.
I think that's all ways that you can protect yourself from
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 the
those
bad
bad
actors.
actors. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Any sort of like books that you would recommend to people around
Ooh.
um good sales practice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a lot of sales books.
Yeah, a lot of sales
For
books in the
sure.
mind.
Yeah, yeah. One apropos to like your question just before this about the bad actors and the stigma. Daniel Pink wrote a book. I believe it's To Sell is Human.
To
Um,
Sell is Human
I
by
th
Damon Pink.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm pretty sure that's the title of it. But he's got a number of different books. He also has like a master class. You sign up for that. He's got a whole host of lectures. But
Yeah.
that's a great, I would say, intro like sales book.
Hmm.
If you're in maybe your first time in sales or like a sales adjacent industry, you just want to know how to be a little bit more persuasive and frame questions and better understand consumer psychology.
Hmm.
That's a great starter book, I would
Hmm.
say, to get
Yeah.
you going. I would say my favorite book is probably from Tom Hopkins, who was his claim to fame was in real estate. He sold 365 homes in 1 year, home and day, and he was just like, all right, I figured this out. I'm just gonna go, teach people how to do this.
365 homes
365
in one
homes.
year.
Yo,
That's
absolutely
literally a
crushed
home a
it.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Um,
insane.
yeah, and I mean, he talks about it in the book. Like of course, he was hustling. He was working 6 7
Hmm.
days a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
But that doesn't just come from putting in the hours. Like you have to know exactly what you're doing. And there's a lot of great sales practices that he preaches in that and a number of his books that
Hmm.
really helped me get my feet under me, in
Right.
those first few years of sales and
Yeah.
build up that skill set.
That's good. That's good. Because a lot of people, when they first go into sales, they're just like, oh, I'm in sales. I just talk to people.
Yeah,
That's my job is to, answer questions and talk about the product and really talk about them. But that's the wrong mindset. And as you go into reading
yeah,
these books and studying how great people do it, you learn that it's a lot more empathetic than that. You have to listen. And there's certain ways you can frame questions that not necessarily manipulative, but really gets the truth out of people. Because
yeah,
a lot of times when people talk or people answer questions, they're kind of hiding the truth, and it's like your job to overturn every rock and truly understand like what the other person's pain point is,
yeah.
right?
I couldn't agree more. They talk about it in this book, but I think it was originally Epictetus, like a Stoic philosopher, that said this. But he basically said, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason,
Hmm.
right?
There you go.
Use them proportionately. And I think that there's a misconception that a lot of people that are extroverted, they
Should be in
love
sales.
to
They're
talk. They
gonna
should be in
excel.
sales. They would crush it.
Hmm.
And it's empirically, I found it's kind of the opposite because they end up just
Yeah.
steamrolling over the customer and not letting them get a word in, and they really don't, because of that, they don't know where they should be steering the conversation to get to that close, to get to
Hmm.
that next step.
Yeah, exactly. And they say people buy from people.
Yeah,
And after the conversation, if the person that you're speaking to is left feeling like they just got talked at, like just got
yeah,
sat in a lecture for an hour,
yep,
they're probably not going to be interested unless you all have like a good back and forth dialogue,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. Cool, man. So that's awesome. I want to transition into where you are now in the energy tech space. We talked a little bit about like what drew you to it, but talk to me just about your journey through energy.
Yeah,
And I just love to know like ups and downs from a both sales perspective and then also a sales role perspective because I know you've done a couple different things in the
yeah,
industry.
yeah.
Yeah.
Man, where to begin? So, I mean, I went to a maritime college, which is like a pseudo military, so like you wear the uniform, but you don't have to like serve in the military afterwards. And that actually led me to an internship, a shipping agency, where I did a lot of like oil and natural gas projects, and that's what kind of like sparked that, you know,
Yeah.
that flame and got me really interested in energy.
Okay.
I actually wanted to work in oil and gas when I got
Yeah.
out of college.
What were those projects? What were those projects?
I had to, oh man, I'm digging back now, like over a decade, but I had to research every basically import and export natural gas terminal in the US, liquefaction, regasification terminals. So this was right around like the big shale boom. So we were going from like just starting to go from like a major importer of natural gas to now we've got the supply to actually start exporting. So it was during that kind of pivotal moment, like 2014, 2015,
Yeah.
where the, you know, the energy mix was really starting to shift.
That's a really cool time to get into it.
So yeah, that's what got me interested. Come graduation, you know, very few oil and gas companies were hiring like business majors. And like I said, I spoke with that professor who knew I was interested in energy. He ended up landing me an interview and helped me get that first job in sales and solar. And then I just fell in love with like renewables. And I don't see myself ever straying too far off
Okay.
from this industry
Yeah.
over my career. But yeah, that got me kicked off. You know, at that first role, really the main focus was just sales, just get the contract signed.
And that was with residential houses,
Yep.
right? So you were selling solar roof panels.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Gotcha.
So that was B2C, you know, in person. And then I actually ended up after like 3+ years there, I worked for a company called Energy Sage, and they run like an online shopping comparison platform
Okay.
for solar.
Still in the residential?
Yeah,
Okay.
their focus is residential. However, they've branched off into commercial and other sides of the industry, HVAC, etc.
Gotcha.
But that gave me a chance to kind of brush up on my inside sales skills, still B2C, and the occasional B2B. And I got to work on some cool projects and really get a broader grasp on like the energy, industry as a whole for like the country.
Nice.
Differs a lot in different states. And
Yeah.
from there, cut my teeth in commercial on like B2B sales. Moved out to a commercial installer out here, Cincinnati, Ohio, a few years ago. Much longer sales cycles, as I'm sure you're familiar with, and like the B2C side.
Yeah, most of my life has been in B2B, and I'm jealous of the B2C and how quick it is.
That's one thing I miss.
Yeah, it's like you can make a sale in a week.
Exactly.
It's just not the case in B2B.
No, you gotta be a lot more patient. So
right.
Bigger wins, but yeah, lower volume.
A lot bigger wins. You're just dealing with many different decision makers, and everybody's time is like never aligned.
Yeah.
So setting up, the meetings with the decision makers is always difficult and stuff like that. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Usually you have to get through a gatekeeper, and then, even if you reach, like in my case, it's often like a facilities manager or something like that. Like there's still several more decision makers, behind the curtain that ultimately are going to get the final say.
Right. So
So
you get to the champion, and then the champion's like, all right, let me go and try and
yeah,
sell it up
let
the
me run this
chain.
up the
Exactly. Like who's the
up the
actual
flagpole.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But
So
anywho, I digress. Keep on going.
But yeah, so that was the last 3, and now I'm at a energy as a service company. So we offer financing for a number of different products in kind of the home energy space.
Yeah.
Largely being like rooftop solar, battery storage, EV charging, things like that. So it was funny that the company that I'm at now actually financed my first system that I sold.
That you sold in the beginning?
Yeah.
The full circle.
Full circle.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been quite a ride.
Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't really say that I'm in a traditional sales role anymore. So I work in business development and basically help identify and implement strategic partnerships and plug into, outside of like the core business.
Yeah.
And then try to stand up new business lines.
Okay. Gotcha. So it's not necessarily going in trying to sell something. It's more.
I mean, I think the sales skills that I was able to develop at those last 3 companies definitely benefits me today in trying to work with, internal stakeholders within the company and just say, hey, we want to do something. totally different that the business has never done before.
Hmm.
And in your perspective, it's going to be inherently risky. And it's my job to sell you on why we should get into something like this.
Right.
And then
Benefiting the ROI because of it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then the, external side, we've got to find the partners to make these, new ambitious ideas actually
Come
come
to
to
fruition.
fruition.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
That's super awesome. And I feel like your journey through sales, it just makes a lot of sense. First, you start really not necessarily knocking on doors, but
Yeah.
more like quick, fast paced, figure out how to talk to people and figure out the industry as well.
Yeah.
And like how to talk the numbers and make a case for
Yeah.
solar. And then now you're in more of like this business development role where you're dealing probably with a lot more like financial models and a lot more like
Yeah.
intricacies in the space. So I feel like that journey makes a lot of sense for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Spending a lot more time in Excel than I did first
For
started
the
off.
first job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a balancing act. I feel there were days, especially in my last company, I kind of like, ran the finance, piece of, project level finance.
Okay.
And there'd be full days where I'd basically spend like 8+ hours in Excel. Like my boss might like come in, knock on my door, and go, hey, can we touch base? And like my brain was just fried. Like I just felt my soft skills just absolutely diminish
Like,
on
how do
days
I
like
talk to
that.
people?
So it's a balancing act. It's good to know the numbers, but you
Mhm.
have to be able to, articulate and still kind of keep that sales mindset when you
Yeah.
present them.
Yeah, right. Because there's ROI in industry. I mean, in the energy sector for
Yeah.
sure, but a lot of it is over 10 plus years. Am I wrong about that? Maybe 5+ years?
It depends. I think one of the common misconceptions around like, our industry and whether or not you have, like a lot of people ask me, hey, do I have a good home for solar?
Okay.
And there's a lot of different ways that you could answer that question. Are you going to be at the house for a while? Do you get a lot of sun, etc.? But a lot of people think that, if you're in like one of the northern states, it's a bad state for solar.
Hmm.
And that's really not the case, right? Like a lot of it depends far more on what you're paying for electricity. You look at the states that have high electricity costs.
Okay.
Those are usually the best states for solar, the most mature markets, I
Gotcha.
should say, right? So like Massachusetts, 10 times the market that Georgia is,
Yeah.
right? Georgia gets a lot more sunshine, but they've got cheap power, not a very developed
They
grid,
use the fossil fuel or
real
whatever.
incentives. Yeah. So there's, I don't know, there's a lot of misinformation, I would say, on the development of those markets.
Gotcha. That's interesting. My brain wants to go all types of places. Where to go first? So when it comes to the value proposition
Yeah.
of solar, gosh, I want to make sure I have it in my brain. Because the value proposition, it's interesting now that you bring that up because it's not just how much sun do you have, it's what are you paying right now for electricity?
Yeah.
And if it's cheap enough, the electricity you're paying for now, solar might not make sense because the installation fees and all that stuff, like you're not going to be saving that much money.
Yeah.
In your experience though, when
Yeah.
it comes to that value proposition, have you ever came across someone who wanted to get into solar more from like the environmental standpoint, where they're just like, I want to help save the environment or something like
Yeah.
that, like a value proposition that's different than like the number game?
Just, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say the overwhelming majority of people need to see the numbers point in the right direction.
Yeah.
It needs to make sense financially. A lot of people will say that, they're interested because of the environmental standpoint. And some people that's really all it is, but there's few and far between, right? Like some businesses will have ESG goals that really dictates like, hey, like regardless of what we're paying for power, what the returns are on this investment, like we have to hit, X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Yeah, reduce scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, etc.
Right.
So they've got numbers to hit on that end.
Mhm.
Homeowners don't really have numbers like that to hit on their end.
Right.
So
And they probably don't really know the numbers as well as the big guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, you zoom out a little bit and you just think like, okay, it's kind of like renting versus owning, right? Like, do you rather rent
Okay.
power from the utilities that are burning fossil fuels,
Right.
or for the same cost a month, maybe even at a savings every month, you want green power that you're getting from your roof?
Mm-hmm.
And at a super high level, that's usually a no-brainer for most folks.
Gotcha.
there's a lot more, you know, questions that follow up on that and concerns and things that you need to walk through, and you know, each sales consultation is different, right? It's kind of like, I know you're a chess guy. It's like a chess game.
Just lost today.
You've got folks that might just practice like closing techniques or opening game, but I think you really need the whole picture to like be able to productively walk through that conversation, reach a close, right? Because otherwise you get to the end game, and if you didn't know your opening, your mid game strategy, and those principles, you've got no material to close. You're in a terrible spot.
You're just like, here's the paper, here's the pen.
Exactly. So I think you come in, you ask, open questions, right? Like how long have you been looking at solar?
Okay.
I love starting with that question because they tell you so much that's so pertinent to where you want to drive that discussion.
Okay.
You're the fourth installer I've met with this month. I've been looking at it for 6 months. I work in the industry, right? Like maybe they're going to teach me something. I don't know that. So not assuming where the other person is at and just letting them tell you to get started, I think is the best approach.
That's huge. And that's a good opening. That's a good opening question, right? Just gives them like the frame of mind to give you all the things that you need to effectively navigate the conversation. So that's huge. How long did it take for you to get to a point where you figured out that question?
A while.
Yeah.
I used to, it was terrible. I would go in and I would just like set up my laptop and like just dive right into the numbers. And I was like, oh, the numbers, this is going to sell itself. And it was so impersonal.
Yeah.
And I finally, graduated to the point where I was just like, okay, pull my backpack down, sit across from them, have a conversation. And I'll ask that question. And then right before they start, I say, oh shoot, do you mind if I take some notes? And they go, oh my gosh, of course. Pull out my notebook, take a few notes, listen to them. Early on in that kind of open-ended discussion, kind of exploratory phase of the call, I want to get those objections on the table. Because otherwise that's going to be in the back of their head the whole time we're chatting. Right. Like,
this. So you can get them all up front.
Exactly. So
address those.
Before I go into any sort of sales pitch, I'll say, so like, what concerns do you have, if any? Like, what are you worried about, or what are you unsure of? And I'll one by one write all of those things down. And that one, it's just good because it gives me a guide of like, all right, I need to hit these things. But it also tells the person across from me, like, hey, this kid's like actually paying attention. Right. He's not just trying to steamroll over me, and
he cares. He cares about what I want.
He cares.
What I've been through.
Exactly.
My concerns with it.
Exactly. And I would address them one by one. And I mean, there's probably a dozen questions that you get, like 80% of the questions are all one of those dozen. So you know how to address them. And you've got ideally a one sentence response to kind of address that concern. And then if they still push back, you can go another sentence or two. And like ultimately you can go like a full paragraph or 2 paragraphs deep if you need to. But sometimes it's just, oh yeah, this isn't a concern because of X, Y, Z. This is what we find. And they go, oh, okay. And then I would just say, so do we handle that? Are we comfortable with that now? And I would cross that off right in front of them. And that is no longer a reason that they're not closing with me. And I would work down that list. And then at that point, we've gotten all the objections off the table before you even start the pitch. And then you've got their full attention.
You pull out the laptop and you can actually, talk about the benefits. That's huge, man. That's huge. I think that's really good advice, really good tactics for people to hear. And when it came to writing out those rebuttals to the objection, did you script them out? Like, did you write them out and just like practice them? Was it something that, tell me about that.
I mean, I don't know what you would call it, but I think some people call it like mind mapping, but like I would, basically sit at like a whiteboard and just think through like, okay, what's like the skeleton like outline of how I want, what's my opening strategy, what's the mid game, what's the close. And then from there you can kind of start to put some meat on the bones with real narrative, like, okay, this question's like gonna pop up at this point, and start even handling and like anticipating objections to come throughout your sales pitch and address them at that time. So it's very calculated. I wouldn't say that it's scripted, but there's an outline that you follow, and then you've got all the rest of the pieces kind of like in the back of your head, and you can plug in.
And I'm sure they appreciate that. They'd rather have someone who knows the ins and outs of the conversation that could happen right? Rather than someone who's just like, well, like, I don't
Yeah,
really know
oh
what
shoot,
to take on this.
I'll look into that and get back with you.
Exactly right. Like, let me
Um,
talk to my boss or something. Like
yeah,
nobody wants to talk to that person. People want to talk to the person who's put together and who has done this before, right? And
exactly.
knows the ins and outs, and all the things that can go wrong and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So every once in a while you get hit with a curveball and you might not know that. And when that happened, I would just say, I would tell them exactly that. I was just like, wow, I'll be honest, I've done this for a while. I've never heard that. Like, that's an awesome question. I actually don't know. But like, I'm gonna jot that down, I'll get back to you on it.
Hmm.
It's not a big deal if you have to do that. I think that's far better than, just trying to make something
Right.
up, like off
Spitball
the cuff.
something. Hmm.
Yeah, that can come back to bite you. So if you genuinely don't know, don't be afraid to just say, you know what, that's a great question. I haven't heard that one before, but let me circle back with you on that. I'll take a note of that. Let's
Yeah.
keep pushing forward.
Nice. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. So when it comes to last question on the objections, when it comes to the rebuttals to the objections,
Yeah.
what would you say was the most effective way to overcome an objection? Was it facts? Was it a metaphor? Was it a story? Like
Yeah.
what were the different types of tactics within that one sentence or paragraph that you
Yeah.
would use?
I'll zoom out a little bit in answering this and say one of my favorite quotes from that guy, Tom Hopkins,
Yeah.
circling back,
Yeah.
was people don't make their decisions logically, they make them emotionally and then justify them with logic,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's the more you think about that, like it's so true, right? Like even like, what do I want for lunch today? I want pizza. Like I should have a salad.
Right.
Logically, that makes more sense. But like, you know what? I had a salad yesterday. I'm like, I was pretty good. I went to the gym. So like, I'm telling myself
All
emotionally,
these facts.
yep, emotionally, I know I want the pizza, and now I'm going to use logic to justify that decision. And it's
Right.
the same thing with, buying consumer goods,
Mhm.
services, anything.
Mhm.
All those decisions, you make them emotionally and use logic to justify them.
Right.
So if you can move them emotionally with some of those objections, right? Like one might be, I was really expecting more savings every month. Like this is, it's $50, whatever it is. I was just, I don't know, that doesn't do it for me. I was expecting more, right? And like logically in my head, I'm thinking, well, like, what are you saving with the utilities? Like, absolutely nothing. That would be the logical response. And like my early days, I'll probably just say that, and they go, yeah, well, whatever. But if you can move them emotionally,
Mhm.
right? So like sometimes a story can help do that. So I'd say, well, you know what, I hear you. That's not, not a life-changing amount of money that you're going to be saving each month, but like, I don't know, you ever like put on like an old jacket or an old pair of pants, like you reach into one of the pockets and you pull out like a 20? Like, I love that feeling. This is free money, like awesome. Like this is like that,
Yeah.
except every month you're gonna pull out a 50 for the next year.
Mhm.
And then as utility rates rise, you're gonna pull out a $70.
Mhm.
And that you can kind of see the gears turning in their head and just like, oh yeah, like I
I
do
like free
love
money.
I do love when I find money, like yeah, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Just to again, it drives in the logic, but it gives them an emotional kind of thing to walk through in their head
Right.
to get them there.
It's a good metaphor. It's a good story to tell at the beginning.
Yeah,
And then, you justify it or kind of relate it back to their current situation,
exactly,
which is awesome.
exactly.
Okay. Last tactical question. Not really a tactical question, but more a question around value proposition of solar that
Yeah.
popped in my head. Does the value of a house go up if they install solar panels?
Yes, I believe Zillow actually had a study on this, and they found that on average houses go up, I want to say 4%
Okay.
or something at resale.
Yeah.
So like even if you do have that scenario, right, where you're like, I don't know how long I'm gonna be at this house, I might not see the return on this investment before I move.
Mhm.
Some people would just say, therefore, it doesn't make sense. It's like, well, no, like you'll save money, maybe you finance it, you're paying probably about the same or less than you would every month to the utilities. So you're either net even or net ahead,
Right.
and you're getting green energy. And when it does come time to sell that house, they tend to sell faster than homes. You have like an identical home that didn't have solar.
Yeah.
They tend to sell a little bit faster and at a higher value than
Nice.
a similar looking home without solar.
Fair enough. It's the question that popped in my head. I was like, I wonder if there's another value prop.
Yeah, I've gotten that one once or twice before.
Yeah, all right. I can tell. All right. Killed it. Something you mentioned when you were first walking us through your journey through the industry was that you got the chance to talk to people all across the United States.
Yeah,
I think you were speaking of it when you were going through your residential days, like your second residential
yeah,
workplace.
yeah.
Is there like differences in talking to and speaking to people from like different states or different cultures? And, like, did you have to navigate anything around like cultures, geopolitics, anything like that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
all the time, all the time.
I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it was just kind of case by case. Like
Hmm.
there's some differences that you can anticipate based on the state, but for the most part, it's like it's homeowner by homeowner.
Yeah.
Right? Some homeowners, let's say that swing more to the right of the aisle might be, their value prop might be, hey, like, I hate the utilities, like I want to own, like I want to be like independent, like
Okay.
screw
Yeah.
the grid, like I want to own this thing and
Right.
take pride in that ownership. People that might swing more to the left, the economics still need to work, but like maybe they want more of the environmental benefits. That's a
Mm.
bigger driver for them.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. I mean, I've had guys say, natural gas is so cheap, like, the utility prices, they're going to go down.
Hmm.
Why would I lock myself into some solar contract? And I would love that. I would entertain all of those, questions. But look, I don't have a crystal ball, but
Hmm.
like, let's think this through. I would draw out a chart and say, this is the cost for your electricity 10 years ago. This is where it is today. It was like double in
Hmm.
Massachusetts. It's like over 25 years. What do you think it's going to be?
Right.
Most people will be like, oh my gosh, it's going to, double again. It's going to triple, whatever. And when they tell me that, it's like, all right, this is going to be a laydown. This will
Yeah.
be easy.
Right.
But some people will say, maybe it'll stay the same. I'm
Hmm.
just like, okay, well, most analysts would, have different thoughts on that, but
Yeah.
like, let's entertain it. Do you want to roll the dice and we can say, okay, let's stick with the utilities, um, and pay X cents per kilowatt hour and hope that they never go up, even though historically that's kind of all they've ever done. Or we can guarantee that, the power from your roof will be at exactly this cost for the next 25 years. Um, which route should we go? Because we got to pick one. And they would usually go like, oh, they didn't love it, but they were just like, yeah, okay, that does kind of make sense.
Got me to
That makes
checkmate.
sense. So yeah, I mean, you get different mindsets. Some people are far more skeptical than
Hmm.
others. But yeah, you just
But
gotta
you want to
play
say it
it.
was like a state by state
I
geographic.
wouldn't say it's state by state. I mean, in
Okay.
certain states, the economics are just much stronger,
Okay.
right? Like certain states,
Okay.
you might pay
Yeah,
like
with the
a
utility.
5 year
Hmm.
payback on your investment. Other years might be longer. Sorry, other states might have a longer payback. But like there's a lot of different financing products out there. You can lease or do what's called like a power purchase agreement, and you're basically just buying the power off your roof for like a set cost per kilowatt hour.
Hmm.
And again, if that is pretty much at or beats the utility,
Then you're
it
good.
usually makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, pencils. And even if you want to finance it, like the systems aren't inexpensive,
Hmm.
right? They might run 20, 30 plus K before incentives start kicking in. But if you finance that on like a monthly basis, you know, you're paying $150 to own a solar system and all the power that comes from it, or you could pay $200 to the utility to not own anything,
Anything. Right.
right? Just keep the lights on.
Hmm.
So
Same things like, do you want mortgage or do you just want to live in an apartment?
exactly. Yeah. If you can get a mortgage for the same price as you can rent, or maybe even less,
Hmm.
and there's not really that much maintenance, a lot of times the companies will actually cover the maintenance for those projects. It kind of becomes a no-brainer. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Awesome. Cool. Well, appreciate your insights on, some of these sales strategies and insights into the industry sector. And you've obviously been a part of many different sales cultures.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, what makes a good culture versus a bad culture in sales?
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. I would say there's a lot of people in sales that are competitive,
Hmm.
and I would probably lump myself in with those folks. But making sure you're surrounded by people that, you know, kind of views the team success as like
Mm.
a rising tide lifts all boats, right? By helping the new guy on the sales team, which I was fortunate enough to have in my first job. That helped the team. Like we hit our goals individually, but we were also looked at as like a branch. Like, how was the Massachusetts South team doing this month? So, find an environment where you can lean on the next guy. And if they're struggling the next month, you know how to sell a product better than they do, vice versa. You can lean on each other and sharpen those skill sets together.
Yeah.
And succeed as a broader team, as opposed to, there are sales environments where it's just like, all right, like I want to be the top salesman every month. I'm like, I'll step on whoever's head.
I'm not helping a single person because if I help them, they might
Exactly.
get better than me, and that's
Exactly.
bad, and that's
And you can't have that mindset.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of reasons, but
No, that makes sense, and that's not a culture people want to stay in.
no,
It's lonely,
it is.
right?
Yeah.
To just have everyone pit against everybody. Only thing anybody really cares about is money, and it's just there's no other reason to do well,
Exactly.
right? That makes sense. Okay, cool. Well, what's next for you?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say I'm still learning and enjoying like the team that I work with, my current role. So until one of those things changes, I'll probably stay put for a little while.
Yeah.
But longer term, I mean, I've done a little bit of independent consulting before, and I really enjoyed that. So maybe someday it's opening up an LLC and getting into full-time consulting or maybe part-time consulting and 1099 sales like on the side. Still not my fun, but
Gotcha. All right, cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Sam. It's a great conversation. How can people get in contact with you, and if they have any questions about solar or just sales strategies?
Reach out. I always enjoy geeking out about solar. So I mean, I'm Samuel Hill. LinkedIn's probably the easiest way to get in contact with me. But yeah, other than that,
Fair enough, man. Well,
appreciate
it. Yeah. Have a good one.